I am often shocked by how many people don't understand the difference between buying a house using a mortgage versus buying a house with cash. But there are plenty of people that don't. So I think it's important to just address this. Keep in mind that the amount of cash you have to have on hand if you purchase a home using a mortgage differs greatly from if you use cash. Now, most people do get that part. Where it gets a little bit tricky is in the closing cost area. In Pennsylvania, we tend to have high closing costs. They can easily run 4% of the purchase price. So keep in mind that somebody who is paying in cash not only has to come up with the cash for the purchase, but also the 4% in closing costs. It's more of an issue for somebody who's using a mortgage, who's already thinking about only having to put, for example, 20% down. Well, to buy the house, the purchase of the house, yes, you might only need to put 20% down, but closing costs are not financeable. So it means that you really should have roughly 25% of that purchase price in cash available because you're going to have to pay the closing costs too. This topic is going to get a lot more scrutiny with recent changes in the National Association of Realtors rules and the settlement of the lawsuit, which talks about who is paying a buyer's agent. If you have a buyer who is not only having to purchase a house, but also potentially paying a buyer agent, that buyer's cash flow and how much they have to spend and how they might structure an offer is going to be very different depending on all of those finances. That's why historically sellers, I think, have paid that commission because it puts such an additional burden on the buyer to come up with the commission as well as the closing costs in cash versus increasing the price of the property enough to cover the commission and then paying only 20% of that because they're mortgaging the rest. So just keep in mind that it's a lot different to buy a $500,000 house in cash than a $500,000 house using a mortgage. And just another little tidbit, same way, I said to someone just the other day, buying a $500,000 house that needs $100,000 worth of work, if you're using a mortgage, is different from a cash layout perspective than buying a $600,000 house, which has already had the work done. Because if you're only putting 20% down and you're financing the rest of it, it's a lot less cash out than putting 20% of the lower amount down, the 500, and then having to find $100,000 in cash. So it's really important to understand the difference.